On the day I passed away, my boyfriend rolled up with his latest crush to our place. They were making out on the couch I had picked out, munching on the celery dumplings I whipped up, and messing around with the game console I had given him, totally oblivious to anything else. Out of the blue, she asked, "Hey, where's Emma?" My boyfriend coolly said we had a fight a few days back and that I was off on a work trip. Little did he know, I was already gone. On Mark's birthday, I got into a wreck while heading home and didn't make it. My spirit hovered above, desperate to see Mark one last time. I saw him bringing his moonlit Lily back to our pad. In the soft glow, Lily's pale face looked a bit flushed, like she'd had a few too many, and she was leaning into Mark almost limp. Mark, Mark. Mark steadied her, smoothing her tangled hair and patiently answering her every word. Usually so detached, he was only this gentle with her. Watching them broke my heart, even though I was ready for it. Ever since I heard about Lily's divorce, Mark had been spaced out, coming home less and acting colder towards me. I discovered Lily's ex went bankrupt and skedaddled with the cash. Lily only realized she was expecting after the split. Harassed by debt collectors daily, she nearly lost the baby a few times from sheer fear. Recently, Mark had been with her in the hospital. We had a fight because he wanted to bring Lily home to look after her. Lily's folks had helped me before, so I couldn't just ignore her. Were my eyes turning red from all this? Mark paused, then flicked out a cigarette. "I promised to marry you, Emma. What's got you so shook?" he asked. He knew the answer, but acted like he didn't. That night, I lost it and broke up with him for the first time. Mark's face darkened. Without a word, he pulled me into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and asked, "Do you even know what you just said?" I shook, his tall shadow looming over me as he aggressively unbuttoned my shirt, biting my lips almost harshly. Emma never talked about breaking up with me. Cold water cascaded down, his warm, steamy breath on my neck, his face a blur in front of me. Lily was just crashing at our place for a bit, and I was going to send her back once the cops found her ex. He whispered in my ear, "There's no way it's between me and her." I struggled, gasped for air, eyes shut tight, threatening. "Unless I'm dead, nothing's going to make me agree." And then, I did die. Mark actually did bring Lily back. I watched him set the tipsy Lily on the sofa, wiping her face with a warm towel. "You're pregnant, shouldn't be drinking so much," he said in a deep, gentle voice, like when he'd scold her for not paying attention in class. Lily, groggy, complained about a headache. Mark chuckled softly, lifted her up, his fingers gently massaging from her forehead to her temples and down to her ear. It was such a sweet moment that tightened my heart, making me pause for a sec before jolting awake with a start. Flashback? Fresh out of college, Mark lost his grandma, and because of his family's situation, Lily's parents weren't down with their relationship and forced her to marry someone else. During those dark 6 months, I helped Mark hang in there, bit by bit. Throughout those tough 6 months, I stood by Mark. 6 months later, he accepted my confession. Then he decided to launch a business and started going out for business dinners a lot. I was the one wiping his face, making him sobering soup, and staying up all night taking care of him. The next day, my eyes were puffy and dark, looking worn out. Mark stared at me for a long time, sighed, asked me to lay on his lap, and gave me a massage. Surprised and feeling spoiled by his not-so-light touch, I threw a little tantrum. "Mark, you can't let anyone else massage me, okay?" I regretted it the second I said it. He just nodded. "Okay." Lily couldn't be anyone else. Suddenly, I felt like I needed to bounce. I couldn't stand watching Mark give Lily a massage, fearing old sparks might fly, or they might hug or even kiss. Just thinking about it stabbed my chest. A swarm of ants crawling up my back, making me restless, itching to run to the door. But as I reached for the knob, a searing pain hit me. Worse than the car crash, ripping me apart from a cliff. I couldn't scream as my body was yanked back. After a few tries, my face turned ghostly pale, drenched in cold sweat. I finally realized something. I couldn't leave this room. Or more accurately, I couldn't leave Mark. Instantly, I lost all strength. I just watched them numbly. Mark had just finished massaging Lily and was about to leave when her hand grabbed his neck. Lily opened her eyes. They locked gazes. "Mark, you still like me?" Lily asked straight up. Mark stared into her eyes. I hate you. Lily paled. His hand touched her face, fingers tracing slowly, almost sighing. But I never forgot you. I smirked sarcastically. A smile flickered in Lily's eyes, and she suddenly asked, her gaze shifting, "What about Emma? She's been with you for 5 years. How do you feel about her?" Mark hesitated, moved his lips, but stayed silent. The room got quiet. Lily's expression changed slightly, her intense gaze fixed on him. Next thing, she tilted her head and kissed the corner of his lips. Mark tensed visibly for a sec, but it was just a fleeting reaction. He then took the lead, pulling her onto his lap, fingers gripping the back of her neck, deepening the kiss. Suddenly, I felt sick in my mind. I covered my mouth, scared my stomach would flip up. "Mark, you've already left me. Don't leave me." "I don't want to be alone," Lily gasped softly, pleading against his lips. "I know you only feel gratitude and guilt towards her. The one you truly like is me," she continued. Lily's kiss landed on his collarbone. Pausing briefly, her hand moving to unbutton his shirt, Mark abruptly grabbed her hand. "No," he said coldly, his eyes icy, a chill spread from him, making even my soul shiver. Lily stared blankly, like she didn't expect to be shut down. "It's because of Emma, isn't it?" I stared at him in a daze, my heart racing uncontrollably. Mark went silent for a moment, looking down without showing any emotion. "Lily, I've got a girlfriend now. It's not right for you," he concluded. Lily got it. A slight smile, tugging her lips. "I'll wait for you." I got it too, smirking ironically. Mark's message was clear. They wouldn't get too close until we officially split. It wasn't about his character or respecting his actual girlfriend. He just didn't want Lily to get hurt or face any backlash. He cherished and protected her so much. As laughter faded, tears streamed down heavily. After tucking Lily into bed, Mark stood alone on the balcony, smoking. His tall figure almost blending into the night, only the tips of his fingers glowing red. My spirit floated a few feet away, watching coldly. Having just confessed my feelings, I couldn't get why he was still so agitated. We hadn't officially broken up yet, probably because of what just happened, the unresolved feelings. Suddenly, his phone rang. Mark grabbed it quickly, his dark eyes fixed on the screen. Next second, a hint of disappointment flashed in his eyes. Curious, I floated behind him and peeked at the screen without shame. What I saw shocked me. Mark had opened our chat. Since our last big fight, we hadn't talked. The last message I sent was, "Mark's birthday is in 7 days. What gift do you want?" Maybe he was swamped with work or at the hospital with Lily and missed it. Now Mark was scrolling up and down, refreshing the screen, like he was waiting for a message from me. I wasn't sure how to react. In a daze, Mark sent a message. "Mark, it's almost 11:30. In that moment, I got his reminder. It was nearly 11:30 p.m. His birthday was almost over. As his girlfriend for 5 years, I never missed celebrating Mark's birthday, always cooking noodles or baking a cake for him. This year, I hadn't even wished him a happy birthday, but I wouldn't anymore. Never again, because I was already dead. After standing on the balcony for half an hour in the chilly air, Mark returned to the living room with a grim look. He glanced at the phone one last time before tossing it onto the couch in frustration. With long legs striding over, he grabbed an egg from the fridge. Expressionless, he sat at the dining table, eating methodically. Gray smoke swirled around his face, making him look colder and more distant. Watching him quietly eat dumplings, a thought hit me. Mark probably still cares about me. I was surprised, then it clicked. Strictly speaking, today wasn't Mark's birthday. His real birthday was a week ago, but 5 years back on this day, Mark's grandma died, and Lily left him. So he didn't want to celebrate his birthday anymore. It was my idea to move his birthday to a week later, and each time, like a dedicated girlfriend, I'd set up his celebrations. An orphan since I was a kid, my birthday at the orphanage was the happiest day of the year for me. I just wanted to bring some joy to him. The first time I celebrated his birthday, I spent months learning his favorite game. I planned to stay up all night helping him finish the game, but ended up crashing on his thigh around 2 a.m. When I woke up, Mark was leaning against the wall, his cold eyes meeting mine all night. The second time, I cooked a big feast, cut a few of my fingers, and ended up with just noodles and cake that were still edible. Mark finished everything and surprisingly praised the cake multiple times, despite his usual reserved nature. I always liked to climb steadily, chest held high. That time, I put a lot into making the cake perfect in taste and look. Mark stared at me for a long time and asked, "Emma, why are you so sweet to me?" I laughed and said, "Because I like you. So, I really like you." Before I could keep confessing, Mark leaned down and kissed me. He always kept his feelings hidden, but that was the first time I felt his intense emotions so openly. And then we ended up in bed that night, both inexperienced and exploring each other. But later, he seemed to have figured things out on his own, gripping my waist tightly, his dark eyes reflecting my tear-streaked face. It was silent and intense later that night, but having a thick skin helped, and the third and fourth times I helped him celebrate his birthday, Mark accepted it. Looking back, 5 years of caring and living together had left a mark on him. A sound snapped me out of my thoughts. Mark also seemed distracted, not even noticing the spoon that fell to the floor. Instinctively, I bent to pick it up, but my ghostly hand just passed through the spoon, leaving me confused. Then, someone else picked it up. "What are you eating?" Lily's soft voice echoed in the room. I opened my palm, watching my hand become more blurry, struggling to keep its shape, then saw Lily's slender, clean hand. Suddenly, I felt a pang of envy. Before I died, my hands were beautiful. I could cook a full spread, breeze through games, but now I couldn't touch anything. "What's this cake flavor? It looks weird." Lily took another bite and poked at the cake in Mark's bowl. Mark frowned slightly but replied, "Carrot." Lily nodded casually and then looked up at Mark, saying, "Today's your birthday." "Why?" Mark was taken aback. Lily smiled openly. "Your phone was on the sofa earlier, and I peeked at your chat history. I never expected your lock screen password to stay the same, 0802, the day we first met." Mark lowered his head, his emotions unreadable. My heart ached a bit. I used to nudge Mark to change his lock screen to our anniversary, but he always refused. Now I got why. "Answer me. Why? Didn't you say today's your birthday?" I glared coldly at Lily. Mark had promised me it was a secret between us, that he wouldn't tell anyone. 5 years ago on that day, bad stuff happened. So she suggested postponing my birthday by a week and celebrating it in different ways. The familiar voice was as deep and cold as always. I bit my tongue hard, a bitter sweetness creeping up, flooding my entire being. I suddenly felt like laughing at myself. Lily fell silent for a moment. "She's really good to you. Did she make this cake specifically for your birthday? Did you lie to me just to sleep earlier for this?" I reminded him of our agreement. Mark didn't respond. The room fell silent. Lily quickly scooped a small bite of the cake and suddenly said, "I want to eat." "No." I let out a hoarse scream. No one could hear me. I reached out to grab her spoon, but I couldn't touch it. Mark's gaze darkened as he grabbed her wrist, warning in a low voice, "Lily." Gazing into his eyes, Lily repeated slowly and deliberately, "I want to eat. Mark, from now on, I'll celebrate every birthday with you." She was forcing him to choose. Mark's jaw tightened, a hint of struggle in his dark eyes. And after what felt like forever, he slowly let go of Lily's hand. Lily finally got to eat the cake. I stared blankly, tears streaming from the corners of my eyes. For the past few days, I floated in the corner, watching them coldly, feeling like I'd lost all emotions. But whether it was my imagination or not, after that day, Mark seemed much colder towards Lily. Besides gaming together, he avoided any other closeness with Lily, even deliberately dodging her touch. One day, Lily suddenly asked, I keep forgetting to ask, "Where's Emma?" Mark hesitated, then calmly replied, "We had a fight a few days ago, and she applied for a business trip." Lily laughed. "After not talking for so many days, maybe she's already thinking of breaking up with you." Mark's eyes darkened, certain there was no way. He subconsciously took out his phone, looking at our chat interface, a hint of unease and anxiety between his brows. Oh, he still didn't know I was already dead. Suddenly, I became curious about his reaction when he finds out. The next day, Mark got the engagement ring I sent him, the one he had given me. A month ago, Mark and I went out to dinner. Midway, a guy across the table suddenly stood up, pulled out a ring without warning, and got down on one knee. He was dressed sharp in a suit, handsome and elegant, meticulously groomed, but his fingers were slightly trembling with nerves. People around us cheered. He had a smile on his face, his eyes locked on me, and said, "Marry me." Tears welled up in my eyes. Trembling, I reached out my hand, letting him slide the ring onto my finger. That night, I was unusually affectionate, holding his head, gazing at the broken light shadow above him swaying all night. After being taken in by foster parents, they had a son the next year. A few years later, they found some random excuse to send me back. What excuse? Seems like it was for stealing things. If being so hungry that eating my little brother's leftover chicken leg counts as stealing. Maybe because of this, I lost the class fee during school. Someone suspected me. And when Mark stood up for me, he settled it in my heart. Later, another not-so-wealthy couple took me in. They were kind, but I stayed cautious, kept to myself. Even as I grew up, I only dared to scoop half a bowl of food. When I finally opened up, they died in a car crash on their way to a parent-teacher meeting for me. I went back to the welfare home. No one wanted to adopt me anymore. I really wished for a real family. Now, Mark proposed to me. I thought, finally, I'm going to have a family. But Lily came back. She wasn't doing well, and the first person she thought of wasn't her parents, but Mark. And my boyfriend, fiancé, dutifully helped her, even offering to bring her home to take care of her. After that messy breakup, I applied for a business trip and flew to England. After that messy breakup, I applied for a business trip and flew to England. After a week of thinking, I sent the engagement ring back via express delivery. I decided to break up with him. That's the ring Mark got today. Seeing the ring, his face clouded like it was about to burst. His eyes seemed covered in unbreakable ice. He kept messaging me, calling, questioning what I meant. Taking a puff of smoke each time, his features grew colder, anxiety almost overflowing between his brows. The constant message failures came from the other side. Only after smoking countless cigarettes until the pack was empty, he finally lowered his eyelids, speaking softly. "Emma, are you really leaving me?" "Yeah, I've already left, completely left. You can finally be with Lily as you wished," I softly replied, even if he couldn't hear me. Suddenly, I remembered something. I'm also a decisive person. Since I returned the ring, I had already decided to break up. Why did I rush back to celebrate his birthday with him? I tried to remember, feeling like I'd forgotten something important. I noticed Mark's absent-mindedness was increasing. That night he was working in the study, Lily thoughtfully brought him coffee. Without looking up, he casually said, "Emma, it's too late now. Go rest first." Lily stared at him confused. Mark froze, murmured an apology, then rubbed his temple like he was hiding something. Next, he seemed lost in thought, staring at a page of his plan, neither flipping it nor paying attention to a visibly upset Lily nearby. The next day, Lily went to Mark's bedroom to clean up. Whether it was a test or not, she subtly packed up my things and accidentally scattered the Lego we had built. Seeing this, Mark unusually showed annoyance towards her. "Don't touch these." Then he pushed her hand away, painstakingly, attentively piecing back together the scattered blocks. As he spent time fixing it, Lily watched in silence. During his interactions with Lily, Mark often drifted off. He would go absent-mindedly looking at the sunflowers I planted on the balcony, the clothes I bought for him in the wardrobe, the goldfish I raised in the tank. Even in conversations with Lily, the moment she unintentionally said something, he would suddenly freeze. Floating in midair, I calmly watched Lily's increasingly pale face. Not just Lily, I also realized Mark seemed to slowly understand his feelings. I squinted, staring at the man I had loved for a lifetime on the sofa. He looked a bit tipsy, his brow furrowed, a blush rising on his handsome face. He was on the phone with his friend Jake. "Do you want Emma or Lily?" Jake asked. He fell silent for a moment. "I've already broken up with her, so it's Lily then." He unconsciously furrowed his brows. The other side seemed to get something. "Mark, the heart is small. Love can only be given to one person. Go find Emma." Mark didn't say a word, lowered his head, fingers gently rubbing the engagement ring. After a long time, I silently watched him. In the past, seeing this scene might have made me happy, but now, I'm dead. I'm dead. Frustration felt like ants crawling into my heart, digging deeper and deeper, making me more agitated. Emotions I couldn't explain churned in my mind, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Jake agreed to take Lily to her parents and even bought a ticket to where I was working. He seemed to be planning to talk to Lily about it that day, but as soon as he got home, Lily came out with soup in hand. Lily never did chores, but today she cooked a delicious dinner herself, even making a carrot cake. On that day, I was wrong. I forced you to make a choice because I was just too scared. Scared of losing you. I didn't want to get married then, but my mom threatened me with suicide. During the 5 years I was with someone else, I thought of you every day. With tears streaming down, her eyes red with a layer of rouge-like blush. I know you have her in your heart now, but I can wait for you. Just don't push me away. She wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his chest, holding onto his clothes delicately, her voice pleading and heart-wrenching. At least, stay with me a little longer, and when she comes back, I'll leave. Okay, Mark didn't say anything, but he didn't push her away either. He sighed softly, gently wiping away her tears, telling her not to cry anymore. It's not good for the baby. How much love does it take to feel disappointed in someone over and over? Over these 5 years, I exhausted all my passion, giving him my all just to barely keep a place in his heart. But she only shed a few tears, and he gave in. Hearing that Lily would stay a bit longer, Jake's expression was complicated. Aren't you scared she'll really leave you once she finds out? Lily and I are just friends now. Mark stood unusually straight, his face unchanged, waiting for Emma to disappear. But by the time Lily had left, she wouldn't know. Jake sighed and fell silent. I watched all this expressionlessly, increasingly looking forward to seeing Mark's reaction when he found out I was already dead. These days, Mark has been with Lily as agreed, and there were no signs of crossing boundaries. Their interaction really seemed like that of ordinary friends. Meanwhile, I've been trying hard to remember what it was I had forgotten, why I rushed back to celebrate his birthday. I had a vague feeling that once I remembered, my soul wouldn't be tied to Mark anymore. I would finally achieve true freedom. But every time I tried to recall, my head felt like it was exploding in pain. Just when I was feeling hopeless, Mark took Lily to the mall and they came across some baby products. Lily picked up a princess dress, giggling and saying she wished for a daughter so she could buy her all sorts of pretty dresses. Mark, do you prefer a son or a daughter? Lily asked curiously. A daughter, Mark replied with a slight smile, his gaze fixed on the baby items. I'd love it, whatever she turns out to be. I stood still, dumbfounded. Memories flooded in, my head pounding, countless images rushing towards me, like wild horses set free. After who knows how long, I collapsed on the ground, motionless. Crying, laughing, then crying. Trembling, I placed my hand on my abdomen. I remembered. The reason I rushed back to celebrate Mark's birthday, the reason I wanted to give each other another chance, was that I was pregnant. After getting the diagnosis report, I decided to have a serious talk with Mark. The night before his birthday, I rushed over. I planned to give him the news in person as a birthday gift. As I touched my belly in the car, I imagined Mark's reaction upon hearing the news. Would he burst into laughter? Probably not. He always had that poker face, maybe just a slight smirk, looking at me seriously. I'm actually happy you're pregnant. Nate, would he be looking forward to our child like I was? I think so. On the night he proposed, he whispered in my ear, his warm breath against my skin, Emma, let's have a baby after we get married. I know you've always wanted a big family. I always knew he understood me so well. Thinking about it, I actually laughed. The driver saw me laughing through the rearview mirror and asked why. I just smiled and told him to focus on driving, especially in that heavy rain. The journey was a bit boring, so I resisted the urge to text Mark directly and started using my phone. Then I realized someone was following me. It was Lily. I opened Lily's social media and saw she posted photos of Mark. From her pictures, I saw how Mark had been diligently taking care of her during her pregnancy at the hospital. It seemed like their old feelings were reigniting step by step, like newlyweds who had just had a child. Getting shots is painful, but with you by my side, I'm not scared. The picture showed Mark's serene profile and two hands clasped together. All these ups and downs, you're still the best to me. The picture showed Mark, who usually was obsessed with cleanliness, peeling shrimp for her. You fell asleep by the bedside last night, and I kissed you secretly. I knew he wasn't sleeping. This post didn't have a photo, but Mark liked it. I stared at the screen, my heart tightening, feeling the blood rushing to my brain. How much messed up stuff does one have to see in their life? I didn't want to see anymore, and then fate didn't let me see any more of it. A big red truck suddenly lost control at the edge of a cliff, crashed straight towards us, and we both, along with the car, rolled off the cliff before the explosion happened. I rushed there full of hope and joy, only to die with despair and hatred. The intense shock made me temporarily lose part of my memory, but the deep hatred let my soul leave my body and follow Mark. I didn't leave him because I loved him. I left him because I hated him. What was Mark doing when I died along with our unborn child? He was taking care of others and their kids. Maybe sensing something, Mark, who was talking to Lily, suddenly furrowed his brows, subconsciously looking around but finding nothing. Then, his phone rang. Jake's trembling voice came through. Mark, I need to tell you something. Please don't get upset. I had imagined countless times how Mark would react once he found out I had died. Now, I finally saw it. Only moments ago, he was chatting with his crush and smiling. Upon hearing the news, he froze for a second with a furrowed brow, then sharply retorted, "Don't play this kind of joke, Jake. It's true." Mark stiffened for a few seconds and scolded, "Jake, don't play this kind of joke." A week ago, the taxi she was in collided with a truck, fell off a cliff, and exploded. Because only a few body parts were found at the scene and no missing person report from the pregnant woman's family, the police didn't find out the truth until a whole week later. Jake choked up over there, like he couldn't go on. It took a whole week for the police to confirm Emma's identity through DNA matching. Mark's face gradually changed, stiffening like a wooden statue. Mark, she was pregnant. Did you know that? She disappeared for a week, and you didn't even try to find her? With each of Jake's questions, Mark's face lost all color, his lips trembling violently. No, you're lying to me, Mark said. Lily looked at him with concern as she gently held his hand. On the phone, Jake paused before sarcastically or mockingly saying, "Are you with Lily now?" The air fell silent for several seconds. "Well, of course Emma was missing for a week, and you were with her all along." Mark hesitated, almost immediately realizing the situation. He forcefully pushed Lily's hand away, his eyes reddened, his expression tense, like a kid who'd messed up. "Her body is now in the funeral home. The police have notified her family to come and claim her. Why don't you go there soon?" Jake remained silent for a long time. "She has no family, only you." Mark stood there blankly, his tall figure slumping slightly, then gradually squatting down, curling up motionless, repeating, "It's impossible. It's impossible." It seemed like he could only say those words. He couldn't bear to believe I was dead. I watched the scene, cold and relieved, after regaining my memory. But after the satisfaction of revenge passed, deep exhaustion and sadness took over. Love and hate were both draining. I lived feeling exhausted, and even in death, I felt the same fatigue. After regaining my memory, I didn't immediately disappear. Besides my soul becoming a bit more transparent, I was still stuck by Mark's side, just a bit further from his daily activities. I followed Mark to the funeral home. The man who usually didn't show his emotions stood stiffly by the door, afraid to come closer. Inside, the staff sighed, saying it wasn't easy to find so many charred remains. The body was all patched up. They said she was pregnant. Yeah, the wrist and finger joints were severely deformed and bent. She must have been trying to protect the baby in her belly. Mark turned pale, swayed slightly, and had to lean against the wall like he was about to collapse. The staff saw Mark and asked, "Are you a family member? Come over here." Mark walked over slowly, with faltering steps. The two people left, leaving him alone in the room. A tall shadow blocked the light above his head, his back stiff, his fists clenched so tightly his fingernails dug into his flesh. He looked at me, covered with a white cloth, and began to speak to himself. "Before I forget, There's something I never told you. His cold voice trembled slightly but stayed relatively calm, just like usual. We were both still very young back then. One day I went downstairs to buy something. A playful little boy took the change from a blind woman's bowl by the road. You rushed over and fought with him. You were so slender, but you fiercely twisted his hand, relentless. The boy couldn't take it anymore, and he gave you a coin in the end. I had heard before that you were an orphan who liked to steal things, but your hair was messy and your lips were bruised. You gasped on the ground for a while, then stood up, put the money back in the blind woman's bowl, and left calmly. The blind woman couldn't see it. The boy wouldn't tell. But I saw it. After that, I couldn't help but pay attention to you, my gaze always unintentionally falling on you. When someone accused you of stealing class fees, my first reaction was to stand up and defend you. I think I will never forget the light in your eyes at the moment. Later, your gaze also gradually fell on me. We would blush when we locked eyes. And you would look at me in a daze. Those years, you stood by my side at the school's award ceremony, handed me water when playing basketball, and when I won the short distance race, you smiled and congratulated me with flowers. When our team won the mathematics competition, it was you who helped me to win. Later, Lily appeared. He paused for a moment, then covered his face with his hand, as if something was flowing through his fingers. Emma, it was me who noticed you first. You fell in love with me? Why did I fall in love with someone else? I watched him silently, thinking there were no ripples left in my heart. Yet a slight but profound pain stirred within. Why indeed? I wasn't a lively person to begin with, but in front of Mark, I always made myself shine like a little sun, trying my best to be nice to him. I have never been so gentle to anyone, and I will never be so gentle to anyone again. Emma, the moment I proposed to you, I genuinely wanted to be with you for the rest of my life. Emma, please give me an answer. Please, won't you? He called out over and over again. There was no response. He began to feel restless, even agitated, his lips turning white, calling my name again and again, until his voice became hoarse, until he could no longer speak. You said you would never leave me. His voice was bewildered, hoarse as if squeezed from deep inside his throat, his shoulders trembling constantly, his eyes bloodshot, resembling a desperate and pitiful beast, appearing terrifying to the extreme and pitiable to the extreme. I watched quietly as this devastated man. Perhaps only at this moment did he truly realize that I was gone. After receiving my ashes, Mark locked himself in the room. I felt my soul getting weaker and weaker, curling up on the floor in exhaustion. In a daze, I heard Lily keep knocking on the door, her voice filled with urgent sobs. Mark, it's been 3 days. Please eat something, okay? Even if she's gone, you can't treat your body like this. She would be heartbroken if she knew. I woke up from half sleep, rubbed my eyes, and glanced instinctively at the tightly closed door. Had it already been 3 days? An hour later, Jake came. He roughly kicked open the door, and a strong smell of smoke and alcohol instantly spread from inside. The glaring light flooded the room, enveloping the man on the floor. Next to him were scattered cigarette butts, toppled wine bottles, and my urn. He was quietly piecing together some Lego. The Lego we hadn't finished before. It had only been a few days, but Mark looked much thinner, with a layer of dark stubble on his chin, his eye sockets sunken. Mark, Lily's voice was hoarse. Hearing the noise, he slowly looked up, his eyes like neglected instruments, bloodshot and void of emotion. Why are you still here? He asked indifferently. He seemed spaced out, murmuring softly, Emma is back. She won't be happy to see you. Lily turned pale. As he was lost in thought, he suddenly raised his head with a hint of panic between his brows, speaking coldly and heartlessly to Lily. This is Emma's and my home. You have no right to stay here. Lily stared at him in disbelief, tears rolling down her face in large drops. Furrowing his brow, Mark seemed to be getting impatient. Just leave. Seeing no response from him, Lily felt embarrassed and ran away crying. Mark continued to focus on his Lego building without any expression, seemingly not caring at all. If you had done this earlier, Jake suddenly spoke up. Mark's face turned pale, his hand trembled, causing a Lego piece to fall to the ground. He gazed blankly at the fallen piece, his eyes filled with pain and sorrow. That day we had a big fight. and I told her that we should bring Lily back home. If it wasn't for that, she wouldn't have applied for the business trip, and she wouldn't have. On the day of the accident, she took a shortcut. She was rushing back to give me a birthday gift. She wanted to give me the news of her pregnancy as a birthday present. And what was I doing at that time? Mark covered his heart area with his hand, closing his eyes in pain. I took Lily back home while she was away. He took a deep breath, then resumed building the Lego, but his fingers were trembling, causing one block to drop after another. Jake, I regret it. I really regret it. Jake stood up straight, looking at him in silence, speaking softly. They say those who betray true love will face retribution eventually, but at the cost of her death. Isn't she too pitiful? Mark's eyes were red, and he couldn't utter a word. Jake let out a long sigh. The way you are now, she wouldn't be happy. Mark, no matter what, you must keep living. A few days later, Mark insisted on arranging a funeral for me. It was drizzling under a gray sky. The whole city seemed engulfed in gloom. Mark stood silently in front of the tombstone, looking at the black and white photo of me on it. The tombstone read, "Deceased wife Emma." One by one, people placed white chrysanthemums at my tombstone. After the funeral, Mark stood still, rain trickling down his hair, leaving streaks of water on his pale cheeks. Jake brought an umbrella and handed it to him. Do you know your heart isn't good? Any cold could trigger an infection. Must you always make things difficult for yourself? Mark tossed the umbrella aside with a blank expression, then let me die from it. And sure enough, he fell seriously ill that day. What started as a minor cold turned into an infection because he refused to take medication, resulting in a 2-week hospital stay. At night, the hospital room was quiet. Mark gazed blankly out the window into the silent darkness. In a gentle and puzzled voice, he said, Emma, why haven't you appeared in my dreams even once? You promised to take care of my heart. Now that I've made it sick, won't you come back to check on me? After being discharged, just as he was recovering from the illness, Mark ended up in the intensive care unit again due to excessive drinking. Jake stared at him with empty eyes, then delivered a hard slap. If you want to die, you might as well let me slap you to death. While you were doing those disgusting things, I wanted to slap you for Emma. She's dead. Who are you trying to impress with this behavior now? Yourself, let me tell you, if it wasn't for your grandma being nice to me and asking me to keep an eye on you, I wouldn't bother with you. If Emma could see you with this self-righteous act, she would feel disgusted. Understand? Mark looked pale, staring blankly at him. Whether or not Mark absorbed Jake's words that day, after that, he stopped decaying and stopped mistreating his body. He went to work calmly and continued his life without self-destruction. But I always felt something was off about him. At night, he would stand on the balcony smoking for a while, the cigarette smoke slowly clouding his face, adding to his sense of loneliness and desolation, unable to dispel the chill surrounding him. After smoking, he would cook noodles a little every day. Before bed, he would quietly look at my urn and say softly, "Good night." I realized I no longer needed to follow Mark all the time, and I felt constantly drowsy. So I spent my days sleeping in the room. These days, he seemed to be very busy with work, always coming home late. I didn't know what he was busy with until Jake called him. Why did you transfer all the company's shares to me? Mark replied calmly, I just wanted to take a break. I heard you donated a large sum to the orphanage. Is it because of her? Jake asked. Mark simply responded with a millimeter, consider it my redemption. So, Jake fell silent for a moment before changing the subject. Lily's ex somehow came back looking for her. They had a fight. He pushed Lily, causing her to miscarry. Her ex turned himself in at the police station, and Lily is still unconscious in the hospital. I heard the situation is bad. She might not be able to have kids in the future. Mark remained expressionless throughout, as if this news didn't stir any emotions in him at all. I'm going to bed now, he said, hanging up. A few days later, when Mark came home from work, he took his usual smoke break on the balcony. When he saw there were still carrots in the fridge, he paused for a moment, then suddenly smiled. It was a smile of acceptance, relaxation, and even joy. I furrowed my brows slightly. Instead of eating right away, he went shopping alone. He went to the baby section, carefully and patiently inquiring with the sales assistant, buying some baby supplies, then went downstairs to buy a lot of roses from the lady. By the way, I haven't seen her in a long time. Where has she gone? Mark stood quietly for a moment. She's on a business trip. The aunt nodded. The flowers in the evening aren't very fresh. Come by tomorrow during the day. I'll give them to you. He gently and firmly refused. No, aunt, I'm going on a business trip tonight. The aunt teased, covering her mouth. I understand. Missing your girlfriend, huh? Mark smiled faintly, his long eyelashes drooping. I miss her. Really, I really miss her. Back at home, Mark sat quietly at the dining table, earnestly finished the leftover noodles, drank the soup clean, then took a shower, changed into clean clothes, placed the roses and baby items on the bed, and looked down for a while. After doing all this, he took out a fruit knife from the drawer that had been placed there at some point, and a bottle of sleeping pills he had bought, poured out all the sleeping pills, and picked them up one by one, swallowing them. I shuddered, staring at him intently. Inexplicable rage surged through my body, overwhelming every inch, gradually engulfing my entire being. He was trying to commit suicide. As he picked up the fruit knife and lightly pressed it against his wrist, ready to make a cut, I screamed, "No way!" With a clang, the fruit knife fell to the ground. Emma! Blood beads continuously overflowed from the wound on his wrist, the smell of blood spreading. Mark seemed oblivious, staring blankly at me. Indeed, when a person is about to die, they will see the person they want to see. Emma, I miss you so much, he muttered. I tried hard to control my emotions, my tone ice cold. But I don't want to see you at all. Mark's face turned pale. He struggled to stand up, picked up the roses and baby clothes on the bed, and with a forced smile, said, "This is a gift for you and the baby." Fidgeting with the two pieces of clothing, he lowered his head uncomfortably. I don't know if it's a daughter or a son, so I bought both. I coldly watched him. We don't need them. His body tensed slightly, still with downcast eyes. I know you're still mad at me for that day. I shouldn't have argued with you. Lily was just my youthful stubbornness. I have always loved you. Truly, always, it's always been you. Jake once said, those who betray true love must pay a price. So I've come to be with you. Emma, I was wrong. Forgive me, please. With each word he spoke, it felt like a needle was piercing my heart. The tightly wound nerves in my body snapped at that moment. I took a deep breath, suddenly smiling. Do you know what I saw right before the car accident that day? Mark looked up dazedly. Staring into his eyes, I spoke slowly. I saw Lily's post. Staring into his eyes, I spoke slowly. I saw Lily's post. Mark's face turned deathly pale. I saw how you took care of her in the hospital with such meticulousness, how you held her hand when she was afraid of needles, how you peeled shrimp for her so carefully, how she tried to steal a kiss from you, and you liked her posts. It was with hatred towards you that I died. So, Mark, how dare you think I should forgive you? Mark had curled up on the floor, his hands covering his head, his eyes empty, tears of blood trickling down. Warm blood ran along his nose, jaw, dripping onto the two baby clothes, staining them a deep red, intense and desperate. Mark seemed to snap back suddenly, staring dumbfounded at the clothes, his voice dry and stiff. The clothes are dirty. The clothes are dirty. Frantically trying to clean them, drops of blood from his wrist also dripped onto the clothes. He froze, trembling, looking at me desperately and despondently. The clothes meant for the baby are dirty. What should I do? I watched him, my heart squeezed as if by a giant hand, painful enough to suffocate me. Closing my eyes tightly, I said, Mark, you don't deserve to die, or to be with us. You must live in endless agony forever. The room fell into an extreme silence. Mark was so quiet that not even his breathing could be heard. After who knows how long, with a sob, he whispered, "Okay." Hearing his response, as if some invisible shackle had been lifted, my soul suddenly felt lighter. As consciousness faded, I seemed to see Mark dialing the hospital's emergency number. He looked at me deeply one last time. I've transferred all my shares in the company to Jake, and I'll donate the rest of the money to an orphanage. Emma, I will have nothing, living forever in remorse. I finally closed my eyes, ready to enter a new world. I wished. In the next life, I hope to have loving parents, a husband who loves and respects me, and several beautiful and adorable children. But please don't let me encounter Mark again.